21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
You want to have a competitive edge in your business? You want to retain your top talent. I'm going to tell you how. Have been the queen of diversity before maybe diversity was even a word we were using. So I just give you two examples. In my personal journey running across the planet, I am Indian. I was born in Africa, lived in Zambia for 10 years. I grew up in the US. People always ask where. So I will say in the South, in Georgia. And then I was in Silicon Valley, which is, all very different parts. And for the last decades, I have been in Switzerland. I'm so Swiss, I even have a Swiss passport. That's on the journey that I've made as a global citizen. On the education side, I actually have a chemistry degree, and I've worked in semiconductor industry. I have worked in financial services. I have an MBA. And so what brought me to this topic was that in the early part of my career, about a decade, I had a fantastic career. I had new opportunities. People were that's why I actually have done so many different things. I actually didn't even realize what a great career I had until the music stopped. And suddenly I found myself in 2008 unhappy at work for the first time. Prior to that, I never even used, much less thought about the phrase employee engagement. But once I was disengaged, poof. So I told you about my various background to say that I had done so many different things. I needed to understand what was in all the different things that still made me happy and what was different now. But as I began to deep dive into this topic, what I realized is that I am far away from the only person unhappy at work. So Gallup says around 20%, if not less, of the world's population is engaged. So what about everyone else? And the numbers, we could spend so much time just talking about the numbers, but you know that when you have turnover, it absolutely impacts your bottom line. As I began to understand what was driving my own engagement, because I had done molecular modeling, because I had done financial modeling, no one was asking me to make a model, but it just became very natural for me to say, wait a minute, there is a formula here. And then the next thing, the world is missing this formula. Employees are engaged when their basic human needs are met. And there are many frameworks we have for these basic human needs. So you probably heard of Maslow's for sure. You've heard of Tony Robbins' Ikigai, the Japanese framework. And it all comes down to safety, certainty, growth, contribution, significance, and meaning having a meaningful job. But the interesting thing is that all of us walking around in the world have these things that we value, but we don't value them all the time equally. The other thing is, what I didn't mention is absolutely the most foundational is connection. And connection just sounds so touchy-feely, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. All of that manager bashing, which I don't like, that goes on LinkedIn, that's what people are talking about. When you have someone who is not supporting you and so on, people run out the door when they are working with someone that they know doesn't have their back. But I'm very much against manager bashing. A few years ago, Gallup, who I'm a big fan of from the point of view that they provide us so much interesting data, but they published a book many years ago called It's the Manager. And while their point is correct, that the manager plays a very big role in retaining and engaging employees, it would be like me writing a book that says the reason there's such a high divorce rate, it's the men. it's not the manager, it's the relationship with the manager. So the thing is, if we can get that relationship right, then you know what? Then all of the other things. So if we get the connection part right, then you already feel automatically safety takes. You feel safer because you know your boss has your back. Contribution. Sometimes just the fact that none of us is probably, most of us are not saving cancer patients, right? But when we say, oh, we're a team, Martin, we do this. You asked me to do something, I do it for us. You already feel a sense of contribution because I'm doing something for us, right? So it's these simple things. And really not about manager bashing. I'm talking about having that resonance that works both ways. If you didn't like working with somebody, guess what? They also didn't like working with you. So it's a two-way street. When I talk about resonance, so to begin with, if I say, oh, we do this quick assessment and we tell you who you work well with, who not so well, and who not at all, that should, I think, raise red flags. Like, what does she mean? Resonance? Is this going to be a team of mini-me's? Is everyone going to be just like me? And hey, I am a structured person. I want to have a creative person. No, not at all. In a few minutes, we are multifaceted individuals. What we do is we take an assessment, a little test on just those things that make for good working relationships and the things that are a no-go. I am a very fun girl at dinner parties, but I have a really military working style. So if somebody meets me and they think I'm going to be fun to work with, ooh, if they are late, one time I will understand, the second time, ooh. And by the third time, I think, oh my gosh, no, I cannot work with this person. So I can go to dinner with this person, but not work. And all of us are like that. Because why? When we work together, it's not the same as when we went to school. I can have my best friend failing every class, but we have a great time after class together. Doesn't matter. What that person does has no impact on me. But when we work with people, you know what? How someone delivers has an absolute consequence on your credibility, on your financial result, on you and your business. And then what are the things that make for a good, smooth, wonderfully collaborative relationship? And what are the things that are getting in the way of, honestly, trust? We talk a lot about trust and belonging. And sometimes for my military side of my personality, I think, it's such touchy-feely words. Like, what does that even mean? But as an owner, as a boss, as an employee, we're not talking about, it doesn't need to be everybody needs to hug each other, belonging. The trust part is when I ask someone to do something and when they ask me to do it, do I do it in the same reasonable way? The book I have published is called The Goldilocks Team. And Goldilocks means right, just right. And actually, I'm going to go a little bit backwards to explain. When I first started learning about this topic, I, of course, read books like Jim Collins' Good to Great, and so many other things in this framework, right? And we all are learning, get the right people on the bus and hire for the right attitude. So then, funny enough, what does right mean? And I feel like someone took me to like the edge of, oh, you are thirsty. Look, there is the waterfall. But I cannot make the gap between being thirsty and a waterfall to quench my thirst. So to me, it was like this, that everyone talked about this right. Everyone nodded along as if we all knew what right meant. And that was the key definition missing. So that was part of the investigation to say, how can I help employers not with some perfect top 10 interview questions, decipher this human being sitting in front of them. If in a non-judgmental, bias-free way, they can understand who is going to be a good collaboration partner for them and who is not, boom, this is what you need. And that's the thing. None of us is standing outside of our body when we're doing interviews. You know how well the person shook our hand, and maybe they tell you something about how they were on a vacation that somehow gets you thinking about something else, and suddenly you're in a different place and you think, wow, this was a great person. But now, is it going to be someone you can work with? Here's what's right. And it might not sound right, but it is what's right. All of us, we are so funny human beings. We all think the way we do it is right. And the further away someone is from how you and I do it, the more they are wrong, the more they're going to be difficult for us to work with. And if they are difficult for us to work with, we are difficult for them to work with. And while there is a little bit of space to mentor people, give feedback, and all of that, let's face it, less than 10% of people keep their New Year's resolution to themselves. Most of us have not changed for our parents, do not change for our spouses, do not change for our children. So the idea that you're going to go to a workshop and change for your employee or your employer is a pretty big ask. So what we do is we find out very much to the point, like the weather app, is it going to be raining or not? Because that's what you actually wanted to know. And then you can leave the app and get on with your life. I have been working on this topic for more than a decade. And while I love to serve clients directly, what I realize all the time is that most people don't understand what is driving engagement in the first place. And I think this is like one of the biggest gifts when you understand the bigger picture of what's going on, then come the solutions. So very recently, about a month ago, I published a book called The Goldilocks Team, Master Retention and Hiring. And I start with saying, why is this even important for your business? You know, I mean, it's one thing to have all the big statistics, but what does it mean for your business? And I will just say, generally, I find the numbers frightening. So wait for it. The cost of retaining and losing and rehiring and retraining, it's about 1.5 times the base salary that you are rehiring for or you're trying to fill. 1.5 times, that is direct cost that's hitting your bottom line. And then, of course, how much the frustration and what it impacts your milestones, what it means for your clients. So the book starts by first talking about why is this even important for you? So that's one thing. The next is, well, funny enough, what is engagement? And so it's like, we're talking about engagement all the time, like we all know, just like we know what the right employee is. Well, if your employees are engaged, we all know it's not going to be tattooed on their face. The crazy thing is, even if you don't know if your employees are engaged, your clients do. Your clients see, oh, wow, every time I talk to somebody, I have to explain who I am. And now it's again the third person. Clients are going to want to de-risk their business away from your toxic environment. And even something as small as if you've gone to the coffee shop and your barista has given you attitude, guess what? as a client, you are on the receiving end of a disgruntled, disengaged employee. So that's a big risk to take. Then, okay, so what is this engagement? What is the foundation for it? Well, it is these basic human needs: safety, security, contribution, meaning. So, the thing is, so much of the way retention strategies are built is illogical as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you in two ways. Every company on the planet has a retention strategy, even startups. And it looks like this. It's either legacy, it's trends, or guesswork. Even startups, it'd say, oh, our HR person just came from that company. Or when I was at company before, we used to do it this way, right? And as far as trends, how many people love to say, in Silicon Valley, they're doing colorful coffee areas and sushi on Fridays, or bring your dog to work. Trends, and guesswork. Managers will say, oh, I know what my team members want. Do you? If you really ask them, or why are you having surprise resignation? Why did that person leave? You shouldn't be surprised, because actually, if you know. So this is where I'm trying to move people away from saying, I already know, or the way the bigger companies do it must be right, or wow, that looks like what Gen X, Y, and Z want. This is bogus. It's very, very simply safety, security, contribution, all of those boring words that I keep saying over and over again. Because funny enough, one chapter focuses on what not to do, because it's one thing to know what to do, but the most crazy thing is all of the things we do, rounds after rounds of layoff. Because when we say safety and security, what are you talking about? But if you've ever been in a layoff environment, if you've been in a restructuring environment where it's not clear what's happening, if you've been at the receiving end of an acquisition where you don't know, are you the acquirer, or are you getting, are you part of the synergies that are getting removed from the bottom, from the company? So there's a lot of things that we do wrong. Next is where the ownership is. Many organizations, the minute I talk to a CEO, they will say, you should have a follow-up with the HR person. Is it? Now I'm going to tell you, it is an open secret that when someone leaves the team, it hurts you. It does not impact your best intended HR person. Period. Next, people love this word. They love to say that when there's a toxic environment, it starts from the top. Do you know that 1 in 4 people know who their CEO is? So depending on the size of the organization, it might not be at the top. Maybe it's just they know what that next manager, how that person is treating them. What I want to say is the things that can be addressed are pretty simple. But first, we need to move away from all of these ideas that are so deeply entrenched in our culture that most of us don't even think about this. Like, for example, when they say culture cares, culture, as if culture is a noun. Who is this culture? And you know what? Culture is also not a room scent. You're not just going to spray it everywhere. Culture can be completely different from one floor to another. I have to bring Gallup into the conversation because this is a fabulous statistic that I'm constantly amazed by. An employee's engagement can vary by up to 70% from manager to manager. I don't need you to memorize this because I say it all the time anyway. What I want you to remember is you have been an employee. You have been an employee in a company, and most of us have been in an organization and our manager changed. And our feeling for that company changed. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's what you can impact. It's like instead of thinking culture in the bigger sense as one entity, instead of saying our corporate communication folks will send out these messages, which are, I don't know, that you can save money on them, put a pause on that. They don't buy you anything, because on the least, if they are irrelevant to your employees, and even worse, they are sarcasm inducing. When we send emails, especially in big corporations that say, oh, we are like a family, and then a few months later, we let go half the family. It's like, no one's dumb, right? And this is so absurd. What I want to say is there are so many things that we take for granted in these spaces that, like, for example, hire for attitude, as if there is a litmus test for attitude. What does that even mean? And who doesn't show up at an interview having their best attitude on? I've talked a lot about framework and what we are doing wrong, and talked so much about all these big things that sometimes it's like, well, what do you want me to do with all that? Some of it's even obvious. Oh, I shouldn't send messages, communication messages that are not authentic. Okay, fine. What do you want me to do with all of that? And here's the thing. The simplicity is, one, the framework, right? But the tool that we've created is actually so simple, because here's the point. Like the weather app, what do you want to know? You need to know is values alignment and interpersonal alignment. I'm going to explain very quickly what those are. For a successful hire, you need capability to be there. If you can love someone, but if they can't really do the job, forget it. Then what is values alignment? Well, companies love to put their values on websites, walls, wherever else. They even expect new candidates applying for a job to say, yes, like you, I value innovation. I value customer service. Maybe they value a paycheck, which they certainly cannot say. So values alignment is the thing that tells you what your employees value and how much it matches to what they're getting. This is such a predictive number. How frequently I show the numbers to managers, leaders, and I will say, oh, here you have places where there's a red flag. This person is not so happy. And they will say, yeah, that person has already resigned. And then the next is this interpersonal alignment. It's, again, not important for you to know the terminology. I'm just a geek, so I focus on being very precise, but the interpersonal alignment, that number tells you how smoothly you work with somebody. Now, let's face it. If you are hiring a physicist for a job in CERN, and there are 3 PhDs in the whole world, and only one, by the way, is willing to even move to Switzerland, you don't care if he or she has a personality you're going to have a challenge with, because you say, wow. But most of our jobs can be done by other people. So guess what? Let's find the ones that it's going to be smooth to collaborate with. So that's the interpersonal part. And while I totally know that the fundamental, the very important relationship with your direct boss, it's also great to have smooth collaboration with your colleagues. So if you want to define teams that quickly can come together and start performing, then this is something you need to know. Now, the bottom line is you can, obviously learn how this is done, build a framework that does that, or for a very reasonable cost, actually, we have done that for you. If you want to learn more, connect with me on LinkedIn or buy the book. It's less than $7. It's the Goldilocks Team, Master Retention and Hiring.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskorik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.